Business Dialogues for Good, a series of inspiring conversations with business leaders dedicated to business for good. In these discussions, we explore successes, challenges, opportunities, and world-changing ideas. Join us, get inspired, and be part of the change.
Welcome to the Business Dialogues for Good Leaders. This monthly episode will be a discussion, as always, between two leaders that are doing their business or using their business or organization as a force for good. So we're talking about companies with a purpose. And this episode will be an interesting discussion about a very important point, namely capitalism. Do we need capitalism? Will it exist? Will it stay existing? Companies within capitalistic system and the crisis that we have. Of course, with all the challenges that go with that. In this episode, we have two phenomenal leaders with great ambitions. On my right-hand side, we have Professor Colin from Oxford University Saïd Business School, who wrote this phenomenal book, Colin, Capitalism and Crisis. That is a part of a trilogy of 3 books describing capitalism and crisis in this book and the definition of a company, why it exists. And we have Frank van der Ven, who's the CEO of this company that is hosting us always, iTeam Global, a company creating cleaning materials and cleaning equipment for cleaning companies all over the world. So welcome to both of you. As you all know, there is a lot of discussion about the capitalistic system. People say we have to get rid of it, we have to change it. So within that capitalistic system, we have companies. As you have a company, you wrote a trilogy even about the capitalistic system and the crisis, as you call it in your latest book. Can you maybe give us a definition of a company? How would you define what is a company?
A company exists to serve a purpose that's relevant to you and me, the societies that we live in, and the natural world that we live in. And what I suggest a company should be looked at as being is an organization or an institution that can solve the problems that we have as individual societies in the natural world. And the reason why it's so exciting to look at a business in that way is that a business is uniquely well placed to bring the resources that are required to solve those problems, the financial resources, the material resources, the human resources, and the ideas and initiatives. And that makes it potentially one of the most valuable institutions in the world. And it's been incredibly successful. It's eliminated a lot of poverty around the world. It's created the growth of nations. It's created an immense amount of prosperity. But it's also been a cause of growing environmental damage, biodiversity loss, inequality, and social exclusion.
So that there is a second part of the definition of a company. It should solve a problem and at the same time not create another problem.
Absolutely right. And in particular, I suggest that when we think about the profit of a company, the returns that it creates for its investors, that should derive from solving problems of other people and the planet, not creating problems for them.
So when you think about that, solving a problem, you would almost think, and now I go to you, Frank, that every company is there to solve a problem. But I don't think it is, because quite often you have a company creating solutions to problems that don't exist. Yeah, how do you see that in the light of iTeam?
First of all, I think Colin's definition is nice for us, but also nice, let's say, that maybe we didn't think about it on all this meaning, which I'm now just hearing, let's say. But when we created the name of the company, iTeam, then the I in front of team was, the first one was inquiring. So the inquiring starts with, do I recognize it's a problem or not a problem? Because it's listening to people that you can find out. This next thing to it would be, how do I do something? We call this innovate. So that's the next I in front of of it, and do it with a little bit joy and energy and enthusiasm. That things goes quicker. Let's say that's inspiring. That's the next one. And I would say the name further is also nice in the definition from Colin. Is together, everybody achieve more. So at the end, also the win-win is somewhere in the name recognized. So going back to looking at what we call a problem, first of all, you need to see the problem, and a lot of people walking around and don't see anything. So let's say, and
what is the problem that you solve, Frank?
we think we solved the problem of resources, water. From day one, we have made water our key item. How can we clean with less water? Because cleaning is associated with water. And at the end, people at home, cleaning their body is associated with water. Cleaning the dishes is associated with water. Cleaning the windows is associated with water. So cleaning and water is more or less equal to each other. So we have said, okay, which kind of processes we have in our industry, let's say, and can we not do it with less water? And around that team, we have re-energized and reinvented a lot of what we call cleaning tools and cleaning machines, with one ambition: to reduce dramatically the use of water. And we were recently on, for example, Interclean show, and then the only thing I walk around is, okay, are there any concepts, any ideas which can bring us further in what I call water saving or energy saving?
So you always look for the problems. But now, Colin, don't you think that many companies exist that do not see the problem? Or does everybody see a problem?
No, and I think this is the point that Frank's making so eloquently, that you have to think of your business in a different way from the way in which many people conceive of business. Most businesses think of themselves as producing products, goods and services. They sell those goods and they sell their services, and that's it. But if you think in terms of, well, actually that's not really the fundamental reason why we exist. We sell those goods and services because those are deemed to be helpful to people. And really what one needs to think about is, well, how does one consider in a collective sense the problems that people face and for which these goods and services are beneficial? And that takes you into a completely different mindset, a mindset that recognizes that a company can create great value, financial value, as well as human benefits and social benefits, by thinking of itself as being a resource to help people to find ways of resolving issues and problems that they face. And Frank put it extremely well when he said, to be able to do that, you really have to understand the problems and issues that people face. And that means changing the nature of a company from something that's just run from the top, where the people at the top cannot possibly really understand the problems that people are facing in locality, in their communities, and in the environments in which they operate. And that creates real value for business as well as people.
So, Colin, this all sounds very logical. But it isn't so logical as it sounds, I think. So when you, Frank, have a company, to you it sounds logical. But if you look at the whole cleaning industry, for example, is that as logical?
No, it's not so logical, because at the end, if you look at our cleaning industry, but if you would look at the cleaning industry at home, if you would go at home this evening and you would look at the cleaning process, you will see that a lot of people are using what we call in our language a mop in the bucket. And if you use that, look at your body language. Your body language is facing the face down to the ground. And you can say nothing wrong with that at home, because people know me at home. But if you do the facing down of your head to the ground in a business, let's say nobody talks to you. So that's where it already starts, that the cleaner gets isolated because there is no connection between the surrounding and the cleaner, let's say. So if you want to change that, you need to see, how can I let her or him standing up? So one of the real problems we have solved is that the cleaner can, like on a dancing floor, if you see a crowded dancing floor, everybody finds his place, everybody dances around the floor and is smiling, let's say. Now, this is our aim and ambition we had in cleaning. So this is what we do. We let people stand up, let's say, and look around. And that's the connection you're making. And then you need to engineer, how do I do that? And all the tools till that moment were all based upon bending down.
Yeah, earlier we spoke together about the lack of ambition and vision. And that is because otherwise you could say, well, why doesn't this happen? Or why doesn't this happen more quickly? And that is, and you said it's lack of ambition and vision.
Yes.
Is that in the companies or also in politics?
Both. We're seeing a lack of ambition both within companies that can achieve far more than they're doing at the moment, and certainly in the politicians who don't see themselves as really being there to serve humanity and the world. And if you think about it, the most successful companies in the world, just take the Magnificent Seven, as they're sometimes termed, the trillion-dollar companies.
The Magnificent Seven, Amazon, Apple, Google, Facebook.
All of those. Those are companies that have had really visionary leaders, people who have recognized that there are significant problems that technology in particular can increasingly solve. Around, for example, Google, Alphabet. It's not just about the internet, it's about giving people access globally to information. Think about Jeff Bezos and Amazon. That's not about just producing consumer products, it's giving people around the world access to consumer products in a way in which they didn't previously have. And Apple, Steve Jobs, realizing that those mobile phones actually could be converted into computers that are of greater power than put people on the moon. You know, those are sort of ambitions and realizations of what one can achieve if one is really ambitious in terms of one's company's objectives.
Yeah, but now maybe I challenge you a little bit that also sometimes those companies lost their way a little bit. For example, Apple not paying their taxes, and so isn't that then the example of a company with a purpose, but at the same time damaging a little bit? Or?
Absolutely right. I'll have two responses to that. Companies inevitably solve problems, and in the process of solving problems, create other problems. Take, for example, Facebook or Meta. Great idea of socially connecting the world. It's created immense problems in terms of the mental well-being of, in particular, children around the world. Facebook, Meta is going to have to solve that problem. And that's how the world progresses. It recognizes problems, it solves them, it creates problems, it solves those problems in turn. That's what I mean by advancement. And just one other point I'd make in regard to this. People, when they set up a business, entrepreneurs, are generally extremely visionary. They recognize the problem that their business is there to create. Otherwise, there's no reason for them to create that business. But in many cases, those visionary leaders are lost, and as the company in particular goes public, it loses its original purpose.
So don't go public, Frank.
I also have no intention to do that because.
What is your big vision for the coming years, Frank?
Now, first of all, would go back to the moment of the company. I think that in the end, let's say, it helps if you are beyond extraordinary. Let's say that's where you really want to drive. Let's say the company in it, because to be ordinary is basically simple. To be extraordinary is not so simple. It means another structure of your company, other people in your company, all of this kind of things you need to see at the beginning. And then the next thing would be, if you would ask the question maybe in 2 or 3 ways. One of them is that we really want to bring, let's say, a cleaner to a hospitality host. That's our ambition to do that. Why? Because we think, let's say, if we bring them there, they see other career possibilities as what we now have. And on a birthday party, nobody is really proud to say I'm a cleaner. Maybe on a birthday party, they would be proud to say I'm a hospitality host, because people would ask the question, what is that? And do you enjoy it? And this is the questions we need to get into this, what we call sector of the market. So that's what we are driving for as a company, and we think that they deserve it, and we think we also can do it, let's say. So that is one of the ambitions we have. The next ambition we have is to make their work, what I call, more joyful by having what we call the 5 minutes, the 3 minutes, the 8 minutes, so it's not a monotone task. And that's another one we have in mind.
Yeah, and great ambitions, visionary leaders. It's all what you're saying also, Colin. I'm also a little bit wondering, when we want to change the capitalistic system as it currently exists, how we are not going to change it by getting rid of it. We stick with the capitalistic system, but we're going to modify it. Yeah. How is that?
We need to modify it in a way that addresses the underlying problems that have arisen. And if you think about it, the problems that we currently confront have really come to the fore, especially over the last 20 or so years. The financial crisis was one factor that really prompted a realization that there was something fundamentally wrong with the way in which the capitalist system was operating. But more recently, it's come to the fore because of the environmental issues, the increasing social divisions that we're observing within countries and around the world. And the issue that I argue lies at the heart of this is the main fuel that drives capitalism, namely profit. Profit is the resource that businesses need to empower their businesses. It's the incentive that drives people in businesses. And the word profit comes from the Latin proficere, perfectus, to advance and progress. And that's what it should be associated with, advancement and progress. But often it doesn't just derive from advancement and progress. It's associated with the regress and advantage of certain members of societies. And that element can easily be addressed by just reconsidering what it means to create a profit. A profit should come from solving, not creating problems for others. And we should recognize that in terms of solving and not creating problems, companies need to invest, they need to be visionary, they need to innovate in ways that achieves that, but also they need to clean up the mess where they create a mess. And that is something that at the moment isn't adequately reflected.
Yeah, but I would say to the financial crisis, I do not know if the description is, I know what the description is, but I would say to you that the financial crisis came out of, I would say, the real estate business. And we can consider this a business. We can consider this as a contribution business. Also, we can doubt about it because the profit is not being done, let's say, on the purpose what you just have said. And so there is one category of businesses I would consider not being contributed to this, what you call definition of it. And if you would look in the Netherlands in the quote 500, 100 of them or 150 of them come out of the real estate business, let's say. And the question would be, they do not come out of the mid-sized business, they could not come out of the normal business, but they come out of a special category. And I think there, let's say, is where the starting went wrong, let's say, in total, that everybody could get maybe cheap money, as we call it, do certain things and not have responsibility of delivering back to the society. And that's where I think you get the disconnect.
Because they didn't solve a problem, Frank, they created the problem, I think.
Exactly.
Because in the Netherlands, and maybe also in the UK, the problem of getting reasonable housing, especially for young people, is almost made impossible by the money-making mechanism of I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So that at the end of the day, so that goes over the purpose. Then they're buying land, which maybe in the future will become something. But if they would become something because the local community is not so fast thinking, okay, maybe we are making the extension from my village to the right, or we're making to the left. They take this ground, let's say, and land, and then it's almost impossible to do that for what I call an economic price of the piece of land under your house.
So could this be then an example, Colin, of a company that is maybe even solving a problem for people to get housing, but then creating another problem for young people to not get an entrance into a house? And that is, maybe we can give some more examples so that the audience understands a little bit better about, we mentioned the cigarette industry. Yeah? The cigarette industry creates a problem, or doesn't it? Can you also say it's a solution to a problem?
No, it creates terrible problems for people around the world, and it falls into the category of what are sometimes termed the sin stocks. Sin stocks, yeah. That is to say, the addictive products of alcohol, gambling, cigarettes, drugs. Fast foods, drugs certainly. And in each case, those products arose for a reason. They were satisfying a demand, a desire that people had. In the case of alcohol, the ability to be able to consume, and in particular to socialize in the context of drinking it in bars and restaurants. In the case of fast foods, the ability to be able to eat easily, cheaply, and consume something that people enjoyed. Now, those are important benefits. So when I'm talking about problem solving, it's not necessarily just problems. One's trying to give people joy from what they're doing, what they're consuming. But in the process of bringing people joy, you shouldn't destroy their health. You shouldn't make them addicted to something that then they cannot really control. And you shouldn't create something that causes significant environmental damage and harm as well. So those companies are in many respects performing a function, but a function from which they're profiting by creating terrible problems as well. And they need to be able to provide that joy without the harm that's currently going with it.
Do you see any other examples of companies, Frank, maybe in your sector, that that create more problems than that they solve?
Yeah, I would say that companies which are making what we call oil-based chemical products are creating the same problems as what we call the cigarette industry. Why? Because it's maybe not the product itself, but it's the damp of the product or inhaling the product, let's say, which is creating your problem for your health. That is not being well known, let's say, to a lot of people. For sure, at home, a lot of people do not know it, let's say, and they still keep on buying those kind of products, which at the end of the day is not good for their health. But if you would say, does it solve the problem of cleaning the stain? The answer is yes, let's say. And does it do it quickly? The answer is yes. Are there other products that do that also? But maybe it takes a little bit of time and another working method.
But before we started this show, Frank showed me a little box that measures the quality of the air in this studio. And then you said, Frank, should the air inside not be cleaner than the air outside?
First of all, in most of the buildings, the air inside the building is worse as the air outside of the building. And it should be the other way around, because inside I should have much more technology available, much more ways available to make the air better inside as it would be outside, because polluted by trucks, polluted by industry, polluted by all kinds of things. But the reality is the other way around, let's say. But because of people also do not being aware, and the answer why the air is not because of ventilation, let's say the mix between the influence of air versus the outgoing of air, all of this is not really balanced in the way how it should be, let's say, in total. And if you do not have awareness, then if you do not feel well, the first thing you go is that the doctor takes your temperature, then he takes your blood pressure, so he takes some data, and the same data we take from the air inside, let's say.
That's why I mentioned the box, because the box is solving a problem that most people don't see.
Yes.
So in your company, Frank, you're solving a problem by making the air clean, and most people, you cannot see if the air is clean. It looks clean to me. No, but it isn't clean. Yeah. So Colin, if this is the view of a capitalistic system in a company, what can boards of companies do to make that change? Because it is a change for many companies.
Yes.
Happen.
They first of all have to recognize why businesses are created, why they exist, their reason for being, namely their purpose.
And the reason for them being a board member.
And for them being a leader of one of those businesses, absolutely. And the recognition that they're there to solve problems and to find ways of making that problem solving commercially viable and profitable is something that boards of companies need to recognize. And increasingly they are. And I do a lot of talking and teaching to leaders around this theme. And it's something that really grabs them once you explain it to them, because they can see that the strategy of a company is about solving problems. And that if this can actually create more value for their investors, it's something that they can also promote to their investor community.
But I think a lot of companies do not know what their founders were standing for and the definition in the DNA, and it gets lost in translation, as we call it. I think we had a good example with Albert Heijn. They remembered, let's say, where our friend Albert Heijn was standing for and why the company was started, let's say. So this DNA was in their thinking and in their execution line. But I think there are also a lot of people who don't really know the founders 100 years ago, 150 years ago, 200 years ago were standing for which kind of philosophy and which kind of DNA. And that's not being translated correctly.
I think that's absolutely right. And the key issue is, how do you retain that visionary leadership of the founders through this progression of a company? And one of the interesting elements that lies behind that is, who owns the business? Who goes on owning the business? Does it remain with the original founder? Not in most cases. In many cases, they get sold off on the stock market, and then they lose their direction. But what one also observes is that in some companies, the founders actually put the company into a foundation that is there to preserve the purpose. They're particularly common in Denmark, which has more foundation-owned firms.
And also Germany has several.
And Germany has several as well. That has proven to be really quite a powerful way for attaining that vision of the original founder.
Are you thinking about Novo Nordisk?
Novo Nordisk is the classic example of this. This is a Danish pharmaceutical company that makes insulin used in the treatment of diabetes. And Novo Nordisk has now become the largest company by stock market capitalization of any company in Europe. And the reason is it discovered its purpose. It discovered its purpose wasn't simply to produce insulin and sell it at a profit. Its purpose was to treat diabetes and to help people treat diabetes. And it realized that in the process of doing that, that a key element was weight. Weight was a major determinant of whether or not people got diabetes. And in the process, it stumbled across Wegovy, which is now a blockbuster weight-treating drug, which has propelled it to be one of the most valuable companies in the world.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, Frank, to see how that how do you think the future? Because you are the founder, you are, as you say, the DNA of this company. Do you also see the difficulties to keep that DNA in the company?
I would lie if I would not say that's not difficult, because at the end of the day it's difficult because it's not yourself. Let's say it's other people need to do that if you would not be there anymore yourself. So that's where it starts already with. So I think one of the ways doing it is creating a good team in the company, let's say, which is maybe thinking like you, acting like you, and believing in your purpose. So that helps to secure the DNA in the company, bringing them long time enough with you, let's say, that they really, let's say, know where you stand for, and they don't go to the left or to the right, but go in the direction you have painted for the company. And the other things is, and that's all the puzzle for everybody, is I would say foundations are helping you by securing certain kind of shares with certain kind of value into a kind of a foundation. So that's kind of a DNA steering committee. That's some things we are looking into also as a company.
Yeah. It's difficult. So to finalize this episode a little bit, first of all, I would like to thank you, Frank and Colin. But before we stop, I was thinking, we spoke about capitalism. And I think we discussed that capitalism should not disappear, but maybe changed a little bit from within. And are there any final tips or remarks to companies that you want to give?
Yes, I think the main remark I'd like us to leave with is the notion that if one thinks in terms of how one can really address problems of the world, this is not a distraction. This is not a cost center. This is not ESG. This is about creating value for us as societies and the natural world, and value for investors in companies as well. And it's an incredibly powerful tool.
Yeah, so ESG, stopping ESG investments is stopping the advancement.
It's distracted from thinking about what is the real reason why one creates a business.
Yeah,
Frank.
I would say that the change, let's say, in the way of wording it, let's say that we go from shareholders to stakeholders, let's say, so we broaden the group, let's say, who can benefit of it is number one. And I call it more realism. How do you make your company healthy enough that you can make the changes you want to do, including the long-term investments in what we call making the better world inside the company and outside the company.
Well, thank you, Colin, Frank, again for your wise words and this open and honest dialogue that we had. And I would like to thank you for watching again this monthly episode of the Business Dialogue, which is being produced by Leaders for Good. We do this every month with 2 leaders, and we like to invite you to follow that. And for now, be inspired.